I checked the oxygen readout one last time, running my finger along the edge of the display. 3,000 cubic feet of breathable air stared back at me, enough for 72 hours in the deep. More than sufficient for a 12-hour test dive, even if something went wrong. Perfect, I murmured to myself, tapping the glass panel with satisfaction. The Nautilus X-90 represented everything I'd poured my life into for the past 3 years at Abyssal Technologies. My baby. My obsession. The culmination of countless sleepless nights and endless design revisions. I'd fought for every innovation, especially the electrical dampening system that made her practically a ghost beneath the waves. No electrical signature meant no detection, whether by human instruments or the sensitive organs of deep-sea predators. I ran my hands over the control console, feeling the smooth surfaces beneath my fingertips. The cabin was snug but not claustrophobic. We'd managed to squeeze in just enough room for a single occupant to work comfortably for extended periods. Each control had been positioned exactly where my hands would naturally fall, every display angled for optimal visibility. A loud clank against the exterior hull pulled my attention upward. Through the circular viewport, I saw the bright morning sun reflecting off the blue-green water. The research vessel Horizon rocked gently on the surface of the Pacific, stationed directly above the eastern edge of the Marianas Trench. Captain Fitzgerald had spent 2 days finding this exact spot, where ocean currents would give me the smoothest possible descent into the abyss. The communication system crackled to life. "Oxygen levels look good from our monitors, Javi," Captain Fitzgerald said, his voice steady and measured. "You still green across the board?" "Confirmed, Captain," I replied, completing my final check of the emergency thrusters. "All systems nominal, batteries at full charge, life support optimal." I heard a familiar grunt of approval. Marcus Fitzgerald wasn't one for unnecessary words. I'd worked with him on 4 previous deep-sea expeditions, and his cautious nature had kept us alive through some tricky situations. When he'd agreed to captain this mission, it had given our entire project added credibility with the board. "Remember, this is just a test run," Fitzgerald continued. "Maximum depth 4,000 feet. We need to confirm all systems work as designed before attempting anything deeper." I smiled to myself. "Copy that, Captain." We both knew I was hoping to push deeper if everything checked out. The mysterious bioluminescent algae we were investigating had been detected at approximately 5,000 feet, deeper than any known photosynthetic organism should be able to survive. If time permitted, I wanted to collect samples. A sharp knock on the exterior hull caught my attention. I turned to see Ben Harris peering through the viewport, his round face pressed against the glass. His lips moved, saying something I couldn't hear. Then he stepped back and gave me an enthusiastic thumbs up. I returned the gesture with a smile. Ben had personally tested and retested every mechanical component of the Nautilus. If he was confident in the systems, that meant something. The man could diagnose a failing pressure valve just by listening to it. His methodical approach to engineering complemented my more theoretical design work perfectly. The communication system buzzed again as Olivia's voice came through, crisp and professional with her distinctive British Indian accent. "Final communications check, Javi. I'll need confirmation signals every 30 minutes once you pass 1,000 feet. "Understood, Olivia." "Every 30 minutes. "And be prepared for potential interference," she added. "The algae density increases significantly below 3,000 feet according to the sonar readings. It might disrupt our communications. That's why we're here, right? To figure out what's going on with this impossible algae." I tapped the specimen collection controls, making sure the mechanical arms were functioning properly. 3 years of design work just to chase some glowing plants. Plants that shouldn't exist at that depth, Olivia reminded me. "The board is very interested in potential applications if we can understand how they photosynthesize without sunlight." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. The real-world applications were what had secured our funding, but for me, the mystery was enough. Something was living and thriving in conditions that should make its existence impossible. That alone made this dive worthwhile. "All right, Javi," Captain Fitzgerald's voice returned. "Final authorization for descent. Are you ready?" I took one more look around the cabin. Every gauge, every display, every system showed optimal readings. The Nautilus was ready. I was ready. "Initiating test dive," I confirmed. "Let's see what she can do." I took a deep breath and pressed my back against the padded seat as the mechanical arm of the Horizon began to move. The entire submersible swayed slightly as it was lifted from the deck. Through the viewport, I watched the sky disappear, replaced by the sight of the ship's hull, then open air, and finally the dark blue surface of the Pacific Ocean rushing up to meet me. The mechanical arm lowered me slowly, carefully, until the Nautilus touched the water. I felt a slight bobbing sensation as my vessel floated momentarily on the surface. Then, with a gentle hiss, water began filling the ballast tanks, and the nose of the submersible tilted downward. I sank beneath the waves, watching bubbles stream past the viewport. The bright blue of the surface water surrounded me, sunlight filtering down in dancing rays that grew dimmer with each passing meter. I kept my eyes fixed upward, watching as the underside of the Horizon grew smaller and more distant, until it was just a dark shape against the shimmering light of the surface world. The Nautilus continued its descent, the blue growing darker around me as I sank toward the mysterious depths below. I activated the external cameras at 500 feet, watching the change around me. The vibrant blue around the Nautilus faded to a deep navy. "Depth check, 500 feet, I said into my comm, more out of habit than necessity. "All systems nominal." I heard Olivia's voice, clear at this depth. "Copy that, Javi. Continue descent as planned." The Nautilus moved steadily downward, its reinforced hull barely registering the increasing pressure. Through the viewport, I watched particles drift past. Tiny marine snow consisting of dead organisms and waste material that would eventually reach the ocean floor. My training had prepared me for this sight, but experiencing it firsthand still filled me with wonder. As I neared 1,000 feet, the darkness deepened. I switched on the running lights, illuminating a cone of water ahead of the submersible. "Approaching 1,000 feet, I reported, adjusting the brightness of the cabin displays to accommodate my eyes as they adapted to the darker environment. That's when I saw them, the first traces of what we had come to find. Tiny pinpricks of blue-green light, barely visible at the edge of the illumination cone. They weren't clustered or dense, just occasional specks that drifted past the viewport like embers from an invisible fire. "First visual confirmation of bioluminescent algae at 1,050 feet, I said, feeling a rush of excitement. Just as Dr. Chen predicted. I remembered Sophia's briefing before the dive. Her eyes had lit up as she described the impossible. Photosynthetic organisms thriving at depths where sunlight couldn't penetrate. If her theory was correct, these algae had evolved to use their own bioluminescence as an energy source. A closed system that defied conventional understanding of photosynthesis. "Excellent," came Captain Fitzgerald's voice, slightly less clear than before. "Maintain descent rate and continue observation." The next 1,000 feet passed quietly. I focused on the glowing particles, noting their patterns. At 1,500 feet, they increased in number. By 2,000 feet, they formed small clusters, resembling distant stars grouping into constellations. When I reached 2,500 feet, everything changed. Scattered points of light turned into a flurry of blue-green sparks. The particles swirled and spun around the submersible in intricate patterns. Base, "I've hit a dense concentration at 2,500 feet, I reported, turning down the running lights to better observe the natural illumination. Visibility reduced to approximately 10 meters in all directions. The effect was beautiful. Particles swirled in the turbulence created by the Nautilus, forming eddies and vortices around the vessel. I found myself transfixed by their movement as they spiraled in the wake of the submersible. "Can you confirm density readings?" The voice, Olivia's, came through broken and distorted now, fragmented by whatever properties these organisms possessed that interfered with our communications. I checked the external sensors. Density approximately 800,000 organisms per cubic meter. They're creating significant interference with sonar and communications. "Need samples." Olivia's voice broke through the static. "Dr. Chen wants immediate analysis." "Copy that. Preparing to collect specimens." I powered up the collection system, watching through the external camera feed as the mechanical arm extended from its housing on the submersible's underside. The joystick controls felt responsive under my fingers as I maneuvered the arm toward the thickest concentration of the glowing organisms. The collection chamber at the end of the arm opened like the mouth of a mechanical fish. I swept it through the water, watching as the glowing particles were pulled inside before the chamber sealed automatically. The sample indicator light blinked green. Collection successful. "Sample obtained," I reported, proceeding deeper. The response was more fragmented than before, but I caught enough to know they received my message. I continued the descent, passing through the cloud of bioluminescence. As I approached 3,000 feet, the concentration thinned, though the individual organisms grew larger. By 4,000 feet, they were fewer, but glowed more intensely, casting strange shapes inside the cabin as their light came through the viewport. The depth gauge hit 5,000 feet when I saw something unusual on the thermal display. Amid the cold water and warmer bioluminescent organisms, a large heat signature appeared at the edge of the detection range. I adjusted the thermal imaging sensitivity, trying to get a clearer picture. Whatever it was registered several degrees warmer than the surrounding water, too warm to be a random current and too large to be any fish species typically found at this depth. "Base. I found a heat signature about 200 meters east of me," I said, unsure if the signal would come through. "It's about 12 to 15 meters long." The shape moved on the thermal display, leaving a faint trail across the screen. Its movement seemed deliberate, as if it were investigating something, or hunting. Before I could get a better look, the signature faded and disappeared from the thermal imaging. I waited, scanning in a slow circle, but it didn't reappear. My comm crackled to life with a burst of fragmented speech. "Return to..." then clearer for a moment. "Do not pursue," before dissolving back into static. I recognized Captain Fitzgerald's voice, and his warning was clear. 3 years of work had led to this moment, and this discovery couldn't be ignored. Whatever that heat signature was, it was unlike anything documented at these depths. I checked my oxygen levels, still plenty for extended exploration, and the structural integrity readings were all in the green. The Nautilus was performing flawlessly. "Sorry, Captain," I murmured to myself as I adjusted course, steering toward the last known position of the heat signature. Some opportunities you just can't pass up. I pushed the throttle forward, feeling the submersible respond as it carried me deeper into the unknown, toward whatever waited in the darkness beyond. I lost contact with the surface sooner than expected. The radio crackled, Captain Fitzgerald's final warning disintegrating into static as I steered the Nautilus toward a narrow canyon where the heat signature had vanished. I tapped the communication panel twice, then a third time with more force. "Base, this is Javi. Do you copy?" Nothing but white noise answered me. I was on my own now. The canyon walls rose on either side of the submersible, their surfaces covered in patches of bioluminescent algae that pulsed with a blue-green light. The glow rippled, making the rock formation seem alive. I thought I saw an opening in the canyon wall, but it vanished when I adjusted course. I checked the depth gauge and felt my mouth go dry. 7,200 feet. The digital readout seemed to mock me. This was nearly twice as deep as my authorized dive limit. The navigation system displayed nothing but blank space around me. No mapped features, no topographical data, just the empty blue of uncharted territory. "You've really done it this time," I said to myself, voice sounding unnaturally loud in the confined space of the cabin. The canyon narrowed even further, forcing me to reduce speed. I kept both hands steady on the controls, making minute adjustments to avoid scraping against the jagged rock walls. The Nautilus responded beautifully, its thrusters giving me the precision I needed to thread through passages that sometimes left only a few feet of clearance on either side. Every few minutes, I checked the structural integrity sensors, relieved to see them still glowing green. 20 minutes of tense navigation passed. My shoulders ached from being hunched forward, eyes straining through the viewport and monitoring the external camera feeds. The rock formations grew more elaborate the deeper I went. Columns and arches that couldn't have formed through any natural process I recognized. Some looked almost carved, though I knew that was impossible at this depth. The sonar pinged, indicating a change in the terrain ahead. The canyon appeared to be opening into something much larger. As the Nautilus emerged from between the narrow walls, the space before me expanded dramatically, and I couldn't stop myself from gasping. I had entered an underwater chamber of staggering proportions. The algae illuminated enough of the cavern for me to estimate its size, at least half a mile across, possibly more. The ceiling arched high above, lost in darkness beyond the reach of the bioluminescence. The chamber was nearly spherical, with smooth walls that couldn't possibly be natural. "My God," I whispered, reaching for the camera controls to begin recording. The algae was unlike anything I'd seen before. This was a living soup so thick it seemed almost solid. When I turned on the Nautilus's floodlights, the beams barely penetrated a few feet before bouncing back, creating a confusing fog of blue-green light. I immediately tried the communication system again, desperate to report what I'd found. "Base, this is Javi. I've discovered something incredible. Please respond." The static that answered me seemed louder now, more final. The thick rock of the chamber and the crushing weight of the ocean above ensured no signal would make it through. I was completely cut off. I switched to the onboard recording system instead, speaking clearly as I documented my observations. Research log, Javier Rojas. I'm about 7,200 feet below sea level in a large underwater chamber. The space is nearly perfectly spherical and at least half a mile wide. The chamber is filled with bioluminescent algae at a concentration much higher than our previous data. I kept recording the temperature readings, the strange rock formations in the canyon, and how the algae reacted to my floodlights. Work kept me focused, but I couldn't shake the growing unease inside me. I was likely the first person to see this place, over a mile from the nearest person across the black water. As I spoke into the recorder, my voice felt small in the vast chamber. And then there was the other feeling, subtle at first, but increasingly hard to dismiss, a crawling sensation at the back of my neck, the kind you get when someone is watching you. I kept glancing at the viewport, then checking the external cameras, seeing nothing but the swirling patterns in the algae. "The specimens move in coordinated patterns," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The flow seems deliberate at times." I tracked a particularly dense cloud of the organisms, as it shifted position, moving against the gentle current created by the Nautilus's presence. For a moment, the cloud formed what looked like a perfect circle before dispersing again. Just coincidence, I told myself, but my hand still reached for the control panel, checking the thermal imaging display. Nothing unusual registered. Just the cool blue of the surrounding water and the slightly warmer patches of concentrated algae. I took notes, recorded measurements, and captured footage of the chamber. The Nautilus drifted through the thick algae, its lights creating shifting patterns around it. My eyes burned from staring at the screens in the viewport, but I couldn't look away. I felt the weight of being watched. I tried to focus on the discovery around me, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the heat signature I'd detected earlier, something large that moved with purpose. It had led me to this place where no human was meant to be. As I adjusted the camera angle to capture another section of the chamber, I saw it, a momentary parting in the algae, like something large had just moved through it. By the time I turned the Nautilus to investigate, the disturbance had vanished, leaving only the gently swirling patterns of countless glowing organisms. The proximity alarm blared through the cabin, its harsh sound making me jump in my seat. My heart skipped as I grabbed the controls, steadying myself. The Nautilus's sensors had picked up something huge about 50 meters behind me. "What the hell?" I muttered, quickly scanning the thermal imaging display. The readout showed fragments of heat, a long, snake-like shape warmer than the surrounding water. Whatever this thing was, it moved with incredible speed for its size, appearing at one edge of the screen before darting across and vanishing again. I tapped the screen, trying to get a clearer image, but the thermal sensors struggled to maintain a lock on the object. The thing was fast, too fast for something so large. Based on the partial readings, I estimated it was at least 10 to 15 meters long, maybe more. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I pulled up the submersible's reference database on the secondary screen. My fingers moved across the touchpad, searching for known large marine creatures in this depth range. Sperm whales. No, wrong shape and they couldn't dive this deep. Giant squid. The heat signature was too warm, and the movement pattern was all wrong. I scrolled through image after image, looking for anything that matched what I was seeing. The database contained everything from common deep-sea dwellers to theoretical cryptids that had never been confirmed. Nothing matched the heat signature I was tracking. "Come on, come on," I whispered, feeling tension build between my shoulder blades as I continued searching. The screen flashed negative results. Nothing in our database matched a creature of this size with this movement pattern at this depth. The lack of information only heightened my growing anxiety. I glanced at the oxygen readout. Still plenty left, but that wouldn't matter if whatever was out there decided I looked like food. The thought sent a chill through me, despite the cabin's regulated temperature. Acting on instinct, I reached for the defense systems panel and activated the submersible's protective protocols. The Nautilus hummed as the external electrical field generators came online, a deterrent system designed to discourage curious predators. Next, I cut power to all non-essential systems, external specimen lights, the secondary sonar array, and the collection mechanisms. The cabin grew dimmer as the lights adjusted to the lower power setting. I watched the thermal display intently, waiting. The bright snake-like shape that had been circling vanished from the sensors completely. Had it retreated? Or was it simply harder to detect with the reduced electrical output? I sat motionless, listening to the quiet hum of the life support systems and my own breathing. The crushing pressure of thousands of pounds of water pressed against the hull, a constant reminder of how isolated I was down here. Minutes passed, The thermal imaging showed nothing. The sonar remained clear of large objects. But the silence didn't comfort me. It made my skin crawl. Something was still out there. I could feel it. "This was a mistake," I said aloud, my voice sounding strange in the quiet cabin. The chamber of bioluminescent algae was fascinating, unprecedented even, but not worth risking my life. Whatever creature had led me here was clearly territorial, and I was the intruder. Scientific discovery could wait for another day, preferably with a better armed expedition. I gripped the controls and slowly turned the Nautilus around, orienting it toward where I remembered the canyon entrance to be. The navigation system struggled to map the chamber accurately due to the dense algae, but I could retrace my path using the breadcrumb trail the system had laid down during my entry. My fingers hovered over the throttle. Should I move slowly to avoid detection, or push to maximum speed and make a run for it? Slow and steady seemed smarter. Less noise, less electrical output, less chance of attracting attention. I eased the Nautilus forward, maintaining minimal speed. The blue-green glow of the algae created an eerie landscape ahead, like moving through an underwater aurora. Beautiful, but now tinged with danger. The proximity alarm screamed again, this time at a higher pitch indicating immediate danger. My eyes snapped to the display. This time the heat signature wasn't behind me. It was directly below the Nautilus. "Oh God," I whispered. The thermal imaging showed something massive hovering beneath the submersible, its heat signature pulsing like a beating heart. It wasn't moving away or around me anymore. It was positioning itself. I jammed the throttle forward, pushing the engines beyond recommended output levels. The control panel lit up with yellow caution indicators, but I ignored them. Getting away was all that mattered now. The Nautilus lurched forward, beginning to pick up speed, when a tremendous impact rocked the entire vessel. I was thrown against my restraint harness as something slammed into the underside of the sub with incredible force. The blow came from directly below, right where the heat signature had appeared. Metal groaned around me as the reinforced hull absorbed the impact. The Nautilus tilted wildly to one side, then the other, spinning almost 90 degrees before the stabilization systems could compensate. I gripped the controls, fighting to maintain some semblance of directional control. Red warning lights now replaced the yellow caution indicators across the control panel. The ballast system flashed critical warnings, and the depth gauge fluctuated wildly as we lost positional stability. One of the external cameras went offline completely. The impact had damaged it. "Come on. Hold together," I pleaded with the vessel, frantically working the controls to level us out. The emergency backup systems engaged with a low hum, diverting power to maintain critical functions. I'd helped design these systems myself, but I'd never expected to need them 7,000 feet below the surface. Another impact, less powerful but more precise, struck near the propulsion housing. The vessel shuddered, and the engine output meter dropped by 20%. Whatever was attacking knew exactly where to hit us. I switched the remaining functional external camera to a wide-angle view and activated the brightest setting on the floodlights. The swirling algae made visibility poor, but I needed to see what was hunting me. For a moment, there was nothing but the glowing blue-green fog of the bioluminescent organisms. Then, something moved through them, something that parted the algae like a curtain. I caught just a glimpse of it as it passed through the field of vision. A nightmare made real. A massive, elongated body propelled by what looked like powerful flippers. But it was the head that made my blood freeze in my veins. Long and arrow-shaped, it appeared at the edge of the camera's range for just a second before vanishing again. But that second was enough. Even through the murky water and swirling algae, I'd seen the rows of teeth that lined its jaw, dozens of them, sharp and pointed like daggers. The creature moved with the fluid grace of a predator that had evolved to rule these depths. It was no known species, nothing that should exist in the modern world. Yet here it was, circling my submersible, hunting me with deliberate intelligence. I knew enough about paleontology to recognize what I was seeing, even if my mind rebelled against the possibility. The shape, the movement, the hunting strategy. It all pointed to something that should have been extinct for millions of years. Something that had somehow survived in this isolated underwater chamber, hidden from the evolving world above. The realization hit me with the same force as the creature's attack on the hull. I wasn't just facing an unknown predator. I was being hunted by a living fossil, a nightmare from Earth's ancient past that had found its way to the present. As if to confirm my worst fears, the creature swept past the viewport itself, close enough that I could see its eye. Ancient, cold, and utterly alien, it regarded me with the detached interest of an apex predator assessing its prey. I pulled back from the viewport as the creature's long head vanished into the blue-green algae. Its rows of sharp teeth were made for tearing flesh. My hands shook on the controls as I tried to process what I'd just seen. The creature had been in my floodlights for only a moment, but that was enough to burn its image into my mind. The most unnerving part wasn't the teeth or the cold eye. It was the neck. As the creature pulled away, I saw its neck stretching back into the darkness, far longer than any marine animal I'd ever studied. It moved in a way that let the head strike with terrifying speed and then retreat just as quickly. My training kicked in despite my fear. I needed information. With shaking fingers, I pulled up the onboard database on the secondary screen, tapping through to marine biology references while keeping my eyes darting between the viewport and the thermal imaging display. Computer, search large marine predators with elongated neck morphology, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the confined space of the Nautilus. The system returned several results, but one image made me stop. I expanded it, comparing the diagram to what I'd seen. The long neck, paddle-like fins, and arrow-shaped head matched perfectly. But the name on the file was confusing. Elasmosaurus. That's impossible, I whispered to myself, scanning the text. Elasmosaurus, marine reptile, extinct for 65 million years. My mind raced. How could a creature from the late Cretaceous period still exist? Yet the evidence was right outside my viewport. Somehow, this isolated deep-sea chamber had preserved what should have been long gone from our world. Before I could process this revelation further, the proximity alarm shrieked again. The thermal display showed the massive heat signature approaching rapidly from behind. The impact hit with far greater force than before. The creature struck the propulsion housing dead on, sending the Nautilus into an uncontrolled spin. I was thrown violently against my restraints. The cabin lights flickered as systems overloaded, and loose items became projectiles in the spinning cabin. My head snapped forward, then sideways, slamming hard against the edge of the control panel. Pain exploded above my right eye, and warm wetness immediately trickled down my face. The metallic taste of blood hit my tongue as I tried to blink away the stars dancing in my vision. Once the spinning slowed, I pressed my sleeve against the cut, pulling it away to see a dark red stain. The cut wasn't deep, but head wounds always bleed heavily. I needed to focus on the damage to the Nautilus. My injury would have to wait. I ran a quick diagnostic, and the results confirmed my worst fears. The main propulsion system was completely offline. The backup systems were functioning, but at severely reduced capacity, just 30% power according to the readings. Multiple red warnings flashed across my control panel. "Come on, give me something," I muttered, trying different restart sequences for the main engines. Nothing worked. The damage was physical, not electronic. Something had been crushed or torn away in the attack. I did a quick calculation based on the power readings. I had enough to move the Nautilus, but barely. Just enough for slow, careful maneuvering. Certainly not enough speed to outrun the prehistoric predator circling outside. Escape would require more power than I had available. Speaking of the creature, I checked the external cameras and thermal imaging. The Elasmosaurus was circling the submersible at a distance of about 20 meters, moving with a sinuous grace that belied its size. As I watched, it approached again, not attacking this time, but brushing its massive body against the hull of the Nautilus. The contact sent a deep vibration through the vessel. Then it did it again on the other side, and again near the damaged propulsion housing. I realized with growing dread what was happening. It was testing the submersible, probing for weaknesses like a shark bumping potential prey. This wasn't mindless aggression. The creature was hunting methodically. As I watched its behavior, a memory surfaced from my training. Lisa Morales, our research technician, had given us specialized sessions on deep-sea predator behavior. I could almost hear her no-nonsense voice echoing in my head. Remember this, Javi. The deeper you go, the less light matters. Deep-sea predators don't hunt by sight. They can detect the faintest electrical signals. Every piece of equipment you use creates an electrical field these creatures can sense from far away. To them, your submersible is a giant sign flashing, "Dinner's ready." At the time, I'd nodded along, mentally filing it under theoretical concerns. Now, watching the ancient predator circling my crippled vessel, testing my defenses, the information took on life or death importance. The Elasmosaurus was hunting me using abilities evolved over millions of years in the darkness. Sensing the electrical output of the Nautilus, just as its ancestors had once detected the neural impulses of prey, I pressed a sequence of buttons on the control console, trying to reset and restart the Nautilus's main engines. The diagnostic had shown physical damage, but I had to try anyway. It was my only way out of this underwater hell. The effect was immediate. The second power surged through the propulsion systems. The water outside the viewport churned violently. My theory was right. The creature's attack intensified with the increase in electrical output. The Elasmosaurus slammed into the starboard side with terrifying force. The Nautilus rocked sideways, throwing me against my restraints. I grabbed the console to steady myself, watching as red warning indicators spread across my display. "That answers that question," I said, my voice echoing in the small cabin. The prehistoric monster circled back. This time it struck the aft section, its massive body twisting to deliver precise hits against our most vulnerable points. The reinforced hull groaned under the assault. It wasn't random. Each attack came more calculated than the last, as if the creature was learning the Nautilus's weak spots. The rear hatch, the engine housing, the external sensor array. It targeted each with uncanny accuracy. I pulled up the structural integrity readout. Yellow warning lights blinked across the schematic, concentrated around the engine compartment and the viewport seal. The Nautilus was built to withstand tremendous pressure, but not repeated attacks from a 15-meter prehistoric predator. Another hit rocked the submersible. This time, a yellow warning light turned red. The impact cracked a secondary pressure seal near the propulsion system. If the primary seal went next, I'd have minutes before water pressure crushed the Nautilus like an empty soda can. I needed to think. What had attracted the creature in the first place? The electrical signature. What made it attack more aggressively? The increased electrical output when I tried the engines. I leaned forward, scanning the control panel. My hands hovered over the switches as I came to a decision that went against every safety protocol in the book. "Total shutdown," I said, more to hear a voice than anything else. "Only keep emergency life support." I began the sequence, methodically cutting power to system after system. The navigation array went dark. The external sensors stopped transmitting. The thermal imaging display flickered and died. The interior lights dimmed as I diverted all remaining power to life support and the emergency beacon. The cabin darkened, with only the red emergency lights glowing. Outside, bioluminescent algae created a blue-green backdrop, allowing me to see shapes through the viewport. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, barely allowing myself to breathe. The Nautilus drifted silently in the water, its electrical signature reduced to the bare minimum. Minutes passed. The silence in the cabin was broken only by my breathing and the creak of the hull. I stayed still, afraid that even shifting in my seat might alert the creature to my presence. The strategy seemed to be working. No impacts had come since the shutdown. Maybe the Elasmosaurus had lost interest in prey that no longer announced itself with electrical pulses. I allowed myself a small sigh of relief, my shoulders relaxing slightly from their tense position. That's when I saw it, a massive shadow passing overhead, briefly blocking the ambient glow of the algae. My breath caught in my throat. The creature was still circling. I tracked its movement through the viewport, turning my head slowly to follow its path. The Elasmosaurus moved with less purpose now, its pattern wider, more erratic. It swam slower than before, occasionally pausing as if confused. My plan was working, at least partially. The reduced electrical output had confused the predator, but it hadn't driven it away completely. The beast knew I was here. It just couldn't pinpoint me as easily. I glanced at the life support readout, the only display I'd kept active. The oxygen level indicator made my stomach drop. The green numbers showed less than 6 hours of breathable air remaining, and that was assuming I stayed calm and kept my breathing regular. If panic set in, that time would drop dramatically. 6 hours wasn't enough to wait out a creature that had likely evolved to hunt with patience, and without main engines, I couldn't outrun it. I was trapped in a failing metal tube with a prehistoric monster outside and a dwindling air supply inside. That's when I remembered something. During pre-dive safety training, Engineer Diego Santos talked about deep-sea creatures and their sensitivity to light. We had all half-listened, thinking it wasn't relevant to our mission. Most deep-sea predators have sensitive eyes, Diego said, gesturing as he explained. They live in darkness their whole lives. Their eyes never developed protection against bright light. That's why the Nautilus has powerful external floodlights, not just to see, but also as a defense mechanism. I looked at the control panel where the floodlight switches were off. The Nautilus had powerful underwater floodlights meant to light up hundreds of feet of water. To a creature that lived in darkness, those lights would be blinding. It was a long shot. I'd need to power up the floodlights, which would increase my electrical signature and potentially draw the creature right to me. But if I timed it perfectly, waiting until it was directly in front of the lights, I might be able to temporarily blind it long enough to make my escape. I stared at the power switches, weighing my options. The oxygen counter continued its steady countdown. The monster continued its slow, confused circles above me. There was no guaranteed safe choice, but the floodlights might be my only chance. I decided against the floodlights. Not yet. The surface team needed to know my location first, or any escape would be pointless. My fingers found the dedicated emergency beacon switch, protected under its clear safety cover. I flipped it open and took a deep breath. The small red button glowed faintly in the dim emergency lighting. This would send out a powerful electrical pulse, essentially screaming my location to the rescue team on the surface. It would also draw the creature's attention, but I had no other choice. Carefully, I pressed down on the button. A soft beeping confirmed activation, and the small display indicated the beacon was transmitting. The emergency power rerouted successfully to maintain the signal. If Rachel Thompson was still coordinating the search from the horizon, she'd pick up my location. I had barely registered the confirmation when the water outside the viewport churned violently. The creature, which had been making slow, confused circles, suddenly changed its behavior. The lazy, searching pattern transformed into a focused, rapid movement. It cut through the glowing algae with new purpose, spiraling inward toward the Nautilus. "Not good," I whispered to myself, watching its heat signature on the dimmed thermal display. The Elasmosaurus had locked onto the beacon's signal with perfect accuracy. It moved like a missile homing in on a target, no longer confused or searching. The electrical pulse from the emergency beacon might as well have been a dinner bell. I gripped the edge of the control panel as the creature's massive form approached the submersible. The blue-green glow of the algae illuminated its elongated shape as it circled tighter, faster, closing the distance with each pass. Then it stopped circling. Through the viewport, I watched in horror as the Elasmosaurus's impossibly long neck twisted through the water. The creature's head, larger than my entire torso, moved directly in front of the glass. Its jaws, lined with rows of conical teeth, were just inches from the reinforced viewport. My heart froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. But instead of attacking right away, instead of those powerful jaws crushing through the viewport, the creature paused. Its head moved in an almost methodical pattern, swaying left to right, up and down. The movement reminded me of a metal detector sweeping across sand. It was scanning the Nautilus. The creature's head tilted slightly, bringing one of its eyes level with mine. I found myself staring directly into the eye of something that should have been extinct for millions of years. The eye was large but strangely clouded, milky and underdeveloped. Despite being inches from the viewport, it showed no reaction to my presence inside. My scientific training kicked in through the fear. I studied the creature as it studied me, the way it moved, the cloudy eyes, the precise reactions to the electrical impulses. It all pointed to one conclusion. This animal didn't hunt by sight. In the perpetual darkness of this deep-sea chamber, eyes would have limited evolutionary value. The Elasmosaurus was hunting by sensing electrical impulses. This ancient predator had evolved in darkness, using electroreception to detect prey, similar to modern sharks but far more sensitive. It wasn't seeing me. It was feeling the electrical field generated by the Nautilus. That's when I realized I had a chance. If its eyes had evolved for darkness, they would be extremely sensitive to light. Any light, but especially the intense beams of the Nautilus's external floodlights. I looked at the control panel. The floodlights were mounted on either side of the viewport, positioned almost perfectly against the creature's massive eye as it hovered there, tasting the electrical field around the vessel. My hands moved across the controls with new purpose. If I was going to do this, I needed maximum power. I began shutting down systems and rerouting their power to the floodlights. Life support rerouted. Communications rerouted. Engines rerouted. I worked quickly, methodically. The oxygen level warning flashed red on the display as I diverted power from the recyclers, but it didn't matter. If this didn't work, I wouldn't need the air anyway. The floodlight charge meter climbed steadily as I channeled everything into them. 70%, 80%, 90%. Outside, the Elasmosaurus continued its scanning, its massive head swaying hypnotically in front of the viewport. Its cloudy eye occasionally passed directly in front of the dormant floodlight, unaware of what I was preparing. The floodlights reached full charge, 100%. With all systems diverted, they would produce a blast of light more powerful than they were ever designed to emit. a flash of artificial sunlight in a world that had never known the sun. I positioned my hand over the floodlight activation switch. The creature's head drifted across the viewport again, its massive eye aligning perfectly with the light panels. I didn't miss what this meant on a scientific level. A living fossil that had survived in isolation for millions of years, evolving in darkness, adapting to hunt using only electrical impulses. A discovery that would rewrite paleontology textbooks. But right now, that evolutionary marvel was trying to kill me. I waited for the perfect moment as the creature's milky eye passed directly in front of the floodlight panel. Victoria Patel. I decided against the floodlights. Not yet. The surface team needed to know my location first, or any escape would be pointless. My fingers found the dedicated emergency beacon switch, protected under its clear safety cover. I flipped it open and took a deep breath. The small red button glowed faintly in the dim emergency lighting. This would send out a powerful electrical pulse, essentially screaming my location to the rescue team on the surface. It would also draw the creature's attention, but I had no other choice. Carefully, I pressed down on the button. A soft beeping confirmed activation, and the small display indicated the beacon was transmitting. The emergency power rerouted successfully to maintain the signal. If Rachel Thompson was still coordinating the search from the horizon, she'd pick up my location. I had barely registered the confirmation when the water outside the viewport churned violently. The creature, which had been making slow, confused circles, suddenly changed its behavior. The lazy, searching pattern transformed into a focused, rapid movement. It cut through the glowing algae with new purpose, spiraling inward toward the Nautilus. Not good, I whispered to myself, watching its heat signature on the dimmed thermal display. The Elasmosaurus had locked onto the beacon signal with perfect accuracy. It moved like a missile homing in on a target. No longer confused or searching. The electrical pulse from the emergency beacon might as well have been a dinner bell. I gripped the edge of the control panel as the creature's massive form approached the submersible. The blue-green glow of the algae illuminated its elongated shape as it circled tighter, faster, closing the distance with each pass. Then it stopped circling. Through the viewport, I watched in horror as the Elasmosaurus's impossibly long neck twisted through the water. The creature's head, larger than my entire torso, moved directly in front of the glass. Its jaws, lined with rows of conical teeth, were just inches from the reinforced viewport. My heart froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. But instead of attacking right away, instead of those powerful jaws crushing through the viewport, the creature paused. Its head moved in an almost methodical pattern, swaying left to right, up and down. The movement reminded me of a metal detector sweeping across sand. It was scanning the Nautilus. The creature's head tilted slightly, bringing one of its eyes level with mine. I found myself staring directly into the eye of something that should have been extinct for millions of years. The eye was large but strangely clouded, milky and underdeveloped. Despite being inches from the viewport, it showed no reaction to my presence inside. My scientific training kicked in through the fear. I studied the creature as it studied me. The way it moved, the cloudy eyes, the precise reactions to the electrical impulses, it all pointed to one conclusion. This animal didn't hunt by sight. In the perpetual darkness of this deep-sea chamber, eyes would have limited evolutionary value. The Elasmosaurus was hunting by sensing electrical impulses. This ancient predator had evolved in darkness, using electroreception to detect prey, similar to modern sharks but far more sensitive. It wasn't seeing me. It was feeling the electrical field generated by the Nautilus. That's when I realized I had a chance. If its eyes had evolved for darkness, they would be extremely sensitive to light. Any light, but especially the intense beams of the Nautilus's external floodlights. I looked at the control panel. The floodlights were mounted on either side of the viewport, positioned almost perfectly against the creature's massive eye as it hovered there, tasting the electrical field around the vessel. My hands moved across the controls with new purpose. If I was going to do this, I needed maximum power. I began shutting down systems and rerouting their power to the floodlights. Life support rerouted. Communications rerouted. Engines rerouted. I worked quickly, methodically. The oxygen level warning flashed red on the display as I diverted power from the recyclers, but it didn't matter. If this didn't work, I wouldn't need the air anyway. The floodlight charge meter climbed steadily as I channeled everything into them. 70%, 80%, 90%. Outside, the Elasmosaurus continued its scanning, its massive head swaying hypnotically in front of the viewport. Its cloudy eye occasionally passed directly in front of the dormant floodlight, unaware of what I was preparing. The floodlights reached full charge, 100%. With all systems diverted, they would produce a blast of light more powerful than they were ever designed to emit. A flash of artificial sunlight in a world that had never known the sun. I positioned my hand over the floodlight activation switch. The creature's head drifted across the viewport again, its massive eye aligning perfectly with the light panels. I took one last desperate look at my oxygen readout, the numbers confirming what my lungs already felt. I was running out of breathable air. The creature's massive head remained perfectly still outside the viewport, its ancient eye fixed on the Nautilus. Even with most systems shut down, it could still sense the faint electrical field from my life support and emergency beacon. My hand hovered over the floodlight activation switch, fingers trembling slightly. This was my only chance. The prehistoric predator had positioned itself exactly where I needed it, directly in front of the submersible's most powerful external lights, its eye aligned with the panels as if presenting a target. I filled my lungs with one final deep breath, closed my eyes for half a second, and slammed my palm down on the switch. What happened next wasn't just illumination, but an assault of pure energy. The floodlights, charged beyond their normal capacity with power siphoned from every other system, erupted with an explosion of artificial sunlight. The beam hit the Elasmosaurus directly in its enormous eye, an eye that had evolved in perpetual darkness, never exposed to anything brighter than the gentle glow of bioluminescent algae. The effect was immediate and violent. The creature's head jerked backward as if physically struck by a solid object. A visible shudder ran the length of its 15-meter body, rippling through muscle and sinew. Its jaw gaped open in what I could only interpret as a silent scream. The long, serpentine neck thrashed wildly, whipping from side to side with such force that it crashed against the canyon walls. Each impact dislodged chunks of rock and sent plumes of sediment billowing through the water. The creature's movements weren't calculated anymore. This was blind panic, the desperate reaction of a predator suddenly transformed into prey. The Nautilus rocked violently in the turbulence created by the Elasmosaurus's frenzied movements. I grabbed the edge of the control console to keep from being thrown from my seat as the submersible tilted sharply to port, then starboard. Warning indicators flashed across every operational screen, but I couldn't look away from the spectacle outside the viewport. The creature twisted in what could only be described as agony, its primitive nervous system completely overwhelmed by the intensity of the light. Its movements became increasingly erratic, less coordinated. The massive flippers that had propelled it with such grace now beat at the water chaotically, creating swirling currents that further buffeted the Nautilus. I watched through the viewport as the Elasmosaurus began to retreat, but not with the calculated precision it had shown earlier. It moved blindly, smashing against rock formations, its head swinging wildly as if trying to escape the memory of the light that had assaulted its senses. The creature's outline became less distinct as it moved farther away, its massive form eventually vanishing into the darkness beyond the range of my view. The moment the Elasmosaurus disappeared, the floodlights flickered and died. The tremendous power surge had been too much. It had burned through the circuitry. The control panel went completely dark, followed by the emergency lighting. The life support readout faded to black, and the soft hum of the remaining systems fell silent. The Nautilus now lay completely powerless, adrift in the pitch darkness of the deep sea. After a few moments of total blackness, my eyes adjusted enough to make out the faint blue-green glow of the bioluminescent algae seeping in through the viewport. It cast an eerie, spectral light across the cabin, barely enough to see the outline of my own hands. I sat motionless in the sudden silence. The creature was gone, but victory had come at an extreme cost. Without power, I had no propulsion, no communications, no way to signal my location beyond the emergency beacon, if it was even still functioning. The temperature in the cabin would soon begin to drop as the heating systems failed. With clumsy movements in the near darkness, I felt along the control panel until I found the manual backup for the oxygen readout, a simple mechanical gauge not dependent on the main power systems. I struck my last emergency light stick and held it close to the dial. The reading confirmed my fears. With all life support systems now offline and only the oxygen currently in the cabin available to me, I had maybe 2 hours left before it ran out completely. 2 hours of breathing in a powerless metal coffin, drifting in the darkness, thousands of feet below the surface. I leaned back in my seat, the light stick casting strange shadows across my face. The Elasmosaurus was gone, likely permanently blinded, but I was still trapped in the abyss with no way to save myself. My scientific discovery would mean nothing if I couldn't make it back to the surface to tell anyone what I had found. I sat in the dark, watching the blue glow of the emergency beacon send out its plea for help. The light stick on the console illuminated my hand, casting shadows across the instrument panels. The Nautilus was silent. No hum of air scrubbers, no beeping sensors, no vibrations from the engines. Outside the viewport, bioluminescent algae glowed in the dark. The blue-green particles drifted past, their light the only thing breaking the darkness. I leaned closer to the cold glass, captivated by the strange beauty. These organisms had likely remained unchanged for millions of years, thriving in their isolated world. The irony wasn't lost on me. After using every last bit of power to blind that ancient predator, I was now finding peace in the soft glow of equally ancient plants. My breath fogged the viewport as I exhaled slowly. I had time to think. What I'd seen, what I'd survived, was beyond comprehension. An Elasmosaurus, a creature that should have been extinct for 65 million years, was alive, hunting in these depths. The scientific implications were staggering. My hand drifted to the collection compartment controls. The specimen samples I'd gathered earlier were still secure inside their pressurized container. Tiny bits of that glowing algae, and perhaps, if I was lucky, a microscopic sample of the creature's skin cells from when it brushed against the hull. DNA evidence of something impossible. Proof that I hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. I checked the oxygen gauge on the wall. The needle was just above the red zone. Based on my breathing, I estimated less than 2 hours left. The cabin temperature had dropped, so I pulled my jumpsuit sleeves down over my hands to stay warm. All this work, I said aloud to the empty cabin, my voice sounding strange after so many minutes of silence. And I might not even get to tell anyone about it. But the thought didn't scare me as it should have. Instead, I felt wonder. I'd seen what no other human had seen. A living fossil. A creature time forgot, in a place humans were never meant to go. The absurdity of my situation almost made me laugh. I'd broken protocol, disobeyed orders, and nearly gotten myself killed, all for discovery. And what a discovery it was. I traced my finger along the crack above my eye where I'd hit my head earlier. The blood had dried, leaving a crusty line that stung when I touched it. A small price to pay for what I'd learned. Time passed in the darkness. Without a working clock, I counted the minutes by my heartbeats, the slow drift of algae past the viewport, and the drop of the oxygen needle. The Nautilus rocked with the ocean currents. I had no control anymore, just like when the Elasmosaurus attacked. All I could do was wait and watch. I must have dozed off at some point, because the harsh beeping of the oxygen alarm startled me awake. My eyes snapped open, and I grabbed the console reflexively. The emergency light stick had dimmed, its chemicals gradually reaching the end of their reaction. The oxygen alarm was the final warning, as Lisa Morales had called it during training. When it sounded, you had about 15 minutes of breathable air left. I took slow breaths, trying to make every molecule count. That's when I saw it. A faint difference in the glow of the water outside. Not the soft, diffused light of the algae, but something directed, artificial. A beam cutting through the blue-green haze. My first thought was that my oxygen-starved brain was hallucinating, creating visions of rescue as a final comfort. But the light grew stronger, more focused. It wasn't moving with the sinuous, predatory grace of the Elasmosaurus. This was direct, purposeful movement. Human movement. I pressed my hands against the viewport, my breath quickening despite my attempts to conserve air. The light split into 2 distinct beams, then 4. The shape behind them gradually came into focus. Another submersible. Smaller than the Nautilus, but built for speed rather than depth. I recognized the profile immediately. A Remora-class rescue vessel, part of our emergency response team. A wave of relief washed over me so intensely that tears sprang to my eyes. I wiped them away with the back of my hand and fumbled for the emergency docking controls, the only system that could work independently of the main power. Through the viewport, I watched as the rescue vessel maneuvered alongside the Nautilus, its exterior lights illuminating my submersible's hull. I caught glimpses of the Abyssal Technologies logo on my own vessel, looking ghostly pale in the harsh artificial light. The rescue craft circled once, assessing the situation, then approached the emergency docking port located at the top of the Nautilus. The manual indicator next to the hatch blinked from red to green as the rescue vessel established a solid seal. The oxygen alarm continued its insistent beeping as I unfastened my restraints with shaking hands and pulled myself toward the hatch. The docking procedure was completely mechanical, no electricity required, which was exactly why Diego had insisted on such a system during the design phase. I turned the manual release valve, feeling resistance at first, then the satisfying give as the mechanism engaged. The hatch swung inward with a rush of pressurized air that nearly knocked me backward. Standing in the opening was Jason Williams, his powerful frame squeezed into the tight space of the connector tube. His weathered face broke into a relieved smile when he saw me. "Cutting it a little close, aren't you, Javi?" he said, reaching down to help me up. I grasped his outstretched hand, feeling the strength in his grip as he pulled me into the connecting tube. Fresh, cool air flooded my lungs, and I took several deep breaths before I could speak. "You have no idea how glad I am to see you," I managed to say between gulps of precious oxygen. Jason secured the hatch behind us and guided me into his vessel. "Captain's been going crazy since you went dark. Search grid's been active for hours. Your beacon signal was weak but steady. Lucky for you." The interior of the rescue craft was blindingly bright after hours in near darkness. I squinted against the light as Jason helped me into a seat and handed me an oxygen mask. I placed it over my face and breathed deeply, feeling the clean oxygen clear my head. "The Nautilus," I started to say, thinking about the samples. "We'll tow it up," Jason assured me, moving to the pilot station and beginning the sequence to secure the Nautilus for retrieval. "It'll be a slow climb to avoid pressure damage, but we'll get your baby back to the surface." I nodded gratefully, still taking deep breaths through the mask. My hands were trembling from oxygen deprivation, cold, or just the pure relief of being alive. I couldn't tell. "The samples," I said, pulling the mask away momentarily. "In the collection compartment. They need to be preserved properly as soon as we reach the surface." Jason glanced over his shoulder as he worked the controls. "Samples? That's what you were risking your life for down here?" I almost laughed. How could I possibly explain what I'd seen? The words seemed inadequate, almost absurd when spoken aloud. "I saw something, Jason. Something impossible." He finished the docking procedure and turned to face me. The rescue craft hummed with healthy power as it took on the weight of the Nautilus. "What kind of something?" he asked, his voice skeptical but curious. I pulled the oxygen mask away completely, feeling strong enough now to breathe on my own. "An elasmosaurus." Jason stared at me for a long moment. "That's some kind of dinosaur?" "Marine reptile," I corrected automatically. "Extinct for 65 million years. Except it isn't. It was there, hunting me. 15 meters long with a neck like a serpent and flippers the size of surfboards." His expression shifted from skepticism to concern. "Javi, you were oxygen deprived. The brain does funny things when—" "The samples will prove it," I insisted, leaning forward. "Not just the algae, but cellular material from when it struck the hull. DNA evidence of something that shouldn't exist." Jason didn't argue further, just nodded slowly and returned to his controls. He probably thought I was hallucinating or suffering from nitrogen narcosis. I couldn't blame him. As we began our slow ascent, I leaned back in my seat and gazed out the small porthole. The blue-green glow of the algae gradually faded as we rose from the underwater chamber, back through the narrow canyon I had navigated hours earlier. What had happened hit me hard. I had gone deeper than allowed, found an untouched ecosystem, encountered a living prehistoric predator, and survived. The scientific community would be shocked if they believed me. But whether they believed me or not, I knew the truth. The evidence was there in the collection compartment of the Nautilus, being towed above us. The impossible was possible. Evolution had taken a different path in that isolated chamber, preserving what the rest of the world had lost to time. I closed my eyes, thinking about the report I would write, picturing Eleanor and Captain Fitzgerald's reactions to my story. They would be angry about the protocol violations, but the discovery would take priority. "You know," Jason said, breaking the silence as we continued our ascent, "even if this turns out to be nothing but deep-sea delirium, you've got one hell of a story." I opened my eyes and smiled. It's not delirium, and yes, I do have one hell of a story. That's when it truly hit me. This wasn't the end of something, but the beginning. I had ventured into the abyss, faced a prehistoric monster, and lived to tell the tale. But the telling of that tale, the proving of what I'd seen, the return expeditions that would surely follow, that was the real journey, only now beginning. The journey back to the surface seemed to take both forever and no time at all. With each meter we ascended, the pressure of the deep eased, but my mind was already racing ahead, to the moment I would step onto the deck of the Horizon with my incredible findings.